What's up, guys? Welcome to the video. My channel is College Football Frenzy, back with another video, and today I'm going to be breaking down my college football playoff and New Year's Six Bowl predictions. So, the college football season is finally here. We're approaching week 3. I'm very excited. This is my first video in a while. I haven't been able to upload, but college football is back, and it's a great time. Obviously, one of the biggest videos to do is predicting who's going to make the college football playoff and the New Year's Six Bowls, and I'll probably do one of these videos every few weeks. This will be my first one, and I'll continue updating it as the season goes on. But yeah, it's very exciting. Obviously, there was some big news today when the Big Ten announced that they're going to start playing in mid-October. That was big news for college football. Definitely great news for a lot of these good Big Ten teams that think they have a shot at making the college football playoff. And they will finish their season before the selection show happens. So the Big Ten will have a chance to be represented in the playoff. So it was a very exciting day in the college football world, and I'm excited to show you my predictions for the college football playoff. I am sorry, guys. I just want to say to my viewers, my subscribers, I'm sorry for such a long wait. I wasn't able to do much over the summer because everything in college football was getting canceled. It seemed like first the Big Ten canceled out of conference games, and the Pac-12 and the other conferences did. So it was hard to keep up and make prediction videos because it felt like when I was starting to make a prediction video, the stuff I wanted to talk about was getting canceled the next day. So I'm sorry about that. But without further ado, let's get in this college football playoff video. I'll explain every matchup briefly, who I think will win, who I think is going to win the national championship. Without further ado, let's get this underway. So first, looking at the bracket, it is pretty boring, obviously. 4 teams that are pretty good each year that you would expect to be there. There's no really shocker team that I have in there. Starting off with the number 1 seed, the Alabama Crimson Tide. I think Alabama is going to be a very good football team this year. Just because they had one one bad season doesn't mean they're all of a sudden going to just be an average team. Even last year, they still went 11-2, so they're still a great team, but for their standards, it wasn't great. But I'm sure they'll bounce back this year and win the SEC. I think they're going to be a very good football team. I'm excited to see what Bryce Young and Mac Jones can do at the quarterback position. They've got a lot of firepower. Najee Harris, obviously one of the best running backs in college football. So that team looks very good. And of course, you've got legendary head coach Nick Saban. So Alabama at 1. Their schedule is not too tough compared to a lot of the other SEC teams. They kind of lucked out in getting Missouri and Kentucky as their add-on games. So I do think they go undefeated this year. Next, with Clemson, I have Clemson going 12-0. So Clemson has a little bit tougher of a schedule than they usually do. You know, there's definitely a few teams in the ACC that have been a lot better than they have in the past. On top of that, they're going to have to face Notre Dame at least once. So Clemson's schedule is going to get a little bit tougher, but overall, I still think they're going to be a very good football team this year. They're stacked on the offense. They're very good on the defense. They've got a great coaching staff, so I expect them to be back. They're the preseason number 1, obviously. They started out with a pretty big win. So I expect Clemson to be great as always. Number 3, I have Oklahoma at 10-1. Not a surprise there. I think they win the Big 12 this year. I think they have one hiccup, maybe against either like TCU, maybe Texas, maybe Oklahoma State. They lose one of those games in my opinion, but I still think at the end of the day, 10-1 is enough to get them into the college football playoff this year, and I think they get the 3 seed over number 4, Ohio State. I feel like at the end of the day, Ohio State going undefeated, that'll be impressive, and beating teams like Penn State and Michigan, that's impressive. But at the end of the day, I feel like with Oklahoma playing 2 more games, they would reward a team like Oklahoma and give them the 3 seed over Ohio State, just because the less games you play, obviously more likely it is for you to have an easier path to the playoff. So I would probably say even if Ohio State goes undefeated, they would get 4. I definitely think no matter what they should be in, but they would probably be at 4 if they were to run the table. And they definitely need to run the table just because there's going to be a lot of good teams this year, even with the Pac-12 canceling. So this is my playoff bracket. Now going to the first round, I have Ohio State beating Alabama just like they did 6 years ago. Most likely will be in the same place too, the Sugar Bowl. I think this will be a great matchup. Justin Fields leads obviously a great Ohio State offense. The defense for Ohio State, a few questions. Obviously, Shaun Wade just opted out. That's a big problem. Their secondary is not going to be very great, but still, that offense is just so good for Ohio State that I don't think Alabama will have enough on the defense to stop the Buckeyes. I think it'll definitely be a close game. It'll be very competitive. I could see it going into overtime, and I wouldn't be shocked if Alabama were to win this game. They're two very good teams, but at the end of the day, I would take Ohio State over Alabama in a close one. And Clemson and Oklahoma, more likely to be in the Rose Bowl, most likely. This, I think, would be a little bit more of an easy one to pick. I think Clemson is clearly the better team here. I think Oklahoma slowly is getting a better defense, but overall, I just don't think it's enough. I feel like Clemson just on offense is so good and on defense is so good. And we don't know about Spencer Rattler yet. He's supposed to be a very good quarterback, but you don't know. He played Missouri State last week. That's not a great team, so you can't make any assumptions yet. He could just be an average quarterback. He might not be as good as Jalen Hurts or Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield. So, right now, I would say Oklahoma. I think they probably lose this by a few touchdowns. Just another semifinal loss for them. I think they're a good team, but they just don't have enough to compete with a team like Clemson. And in my national championship game, I have Ohio State versus Clemson. This would obviously be a very good matchup, a rematch of last year's great semifinal. Ohio State and Clemson, 3 of the 4 times they've played each other, have put on a great show. There's only been one game between the two where it was an actual blowout, but usually when these two play, it's a very good game. Clemson's obviously won each matchup, but it's been close a lot of the time. I think both these teams are extremely motivated. Obviously, Ohio State coming off that loss last year, they're going to be extremely motivated. And Clemson coming off a loss in the national championship. They don't like to lose that much. And Dabo is going to try to make sure that his team doesn't lose 2 years in a row in the national championship. And you've got two great quarterbacks, Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence probably number 1, and Justin Fields possibly 2. You never know. So two great football teams going at it. At the end of the day, I have Clemson winning it. I think Clemson just overall is the better team, and I worry about that Ohio State defense, especially with Shaun Wade leaving. So I think Clemson has the upper hand here. I just don't think that Ohio State defense will be able to stop Trevor Lawrence and his weapons. I just think Clemson has too much offensive firepower for Ohio State to stop them. And Clemson's defense, although I don't think they'll necessarily shut down Justin Fields and company, I think they'll do enough to preserve the win for Clemson. So I have Clemson taking home the national championship. Not really a shocker. They're number 1 to start the season, and I think they'll finish number 1. So yeah, that's my full college football playoff bracket. Now going to the New Year's Six Bowl is the Orange Bowl. It's an ACC team versus either an SEC Big Ten team. This, I have Notre Dame versus LSU. Obviously, Notre Dame's an obvious choice. I think they'll finish second in the ACC. So they get into this bowl game. And LSU, I have them making the Orange Bowl. I think LSU's an 8-2 team this year. They just maybe 7-3. I think that's probably how they finish, either 7-3 or 8-2. No disrespect to LSU, but they have a tough schedule, and on top of that, it just seems like they've lost absolutely everyone. I mean, Jamar Chase opted out, Kerry Vincent Jr. opted out, and those are some of the best players they had, and they opted out. They just lost so much from last year. I think they'll be a good team, but not nearly as good as they were last year. So this will be my matchup. I would probably favor Notre Dame here. I think Ian Book will have a pretty good season. I think the Fighting Irish overall will be a pretty good team for the most part. So I would favor Notre Dame, but it could go either way. But this would be my matchup for the Orange Bowl. The Cotton Bowl, Florida versus Texas. So it should be an intriguing matchup. Obviously, Texas the last few years has been okay or not so great. They still really have not put those great recruiting classes to work. They've disappointed a lot. But I do think Texas will be a pretty good team this year. Hopefully, the good recruiting class actually does something. I think Sam Ehlinger will be decent this year. Florida, on the other hand, obviously is going to be a very good football team. They'll definitely be competing to make the college football playoff. They'll be a good team within the SEC. They'll give Georgia a run for their money. So Florida is a great team. I'm excited to see what Kyle Trask does. This should be an intriguing matchup. I would definitely favor Florida overall. I just feel like their offense will probably just run all over Texas's defense. So I would take Florida here. But again, it's an intriguing matchup between two college football programs that have had a pretty good past for the most part. All right, in the Peach Bowl, very good matchup here. I have Georgia versus Penn State. So at large versus at large, kind of like the Cotton Bowl is. I picked Georgia in this matchup just because they're very close by. Obviously, this game is played in Atlanta, and I think it's a great place for Georgia to go, just close by. So I have Georgia in here, and I have Penn State. A lot of the time, it's an SEC versus Big Ten matchup, so I think this works out well. I think it would be a good game. I originally did have Georgia in my playoff, but with Jamie Newman deciding to opt out, I don't think Georgia will be as good as they would be with Newman. I think JT Daniels overall can be a decent quarterback, but I don't think he'll be able to get them past Alabama. And they're probably going to have to play Alabama twice. Remember, they have to play them once in the regular season, and if they do make the conference championship game, they're going to have to play them again, and I think they would probably lose both times. So I have Georgia missing out on the playoff as probably like a 2-loss team. I think this could be a competitive matchup. Obviously, Penn State, another good football team. However, they lost Micah Parsons, who may be the best defensive player in all of college football. He decided to opt out, so that is very tough. So I think, this would be a great matchup. These two teams definitely won't be the same with some of their players opting out. I would probably give the upper hand here to Georgia. I just think their defense is still very good. So I would give the upper hand to Georgia, but another game that could definitely be competitive. All right, in the Fiesta Bowl, this is a familiar one, obviously. These two teams played each other a few years ago in the Peach Bowl. UCF, I think UCF can run the table this year and finish within the top 6 of the final college football playoff rankings. I think that's a possibility. Before the Big Ten announced that they were coming back, I thought to myself if I should put UCF as the 4 seed, because if they were to run the table and the Big Ten wasn't playing, it was a serious possibility if the SEC didn't have a great second team to put in. But with the Big Ten playing, I don't think any American Athletic team will make it. I think UCF could come close, but at the end of the day, it won't be enough. I think they play Auburn in the Fiesta Bowl. I think Auburn's maybe a 7-3, 8-2 team, similar to LSU. Auburn isn't losing much. The biggest concern is probably the defensive front because they did lose Derek Brown. But besides from that, their offense looks pretty good. I think Bo Nix will have a decent season, and I think they'll be a good football team overall. I would definitely favor Auburn just because they definitely on paper have the better talent. But you never know. UCF has, they've competed with some of these good teams. And a few years ago, obviously, they did beat Auburn. So this could be a competitive game. But anyway, guys, that is my New Year's Six Bowl predictions. I hope you enjoy the video. Make sure to like and subscribe. Give me recommendations. And that is it for now.